I have traveled the world. I've seen the sweeping plains of Mongolia. I've strode the Silk Road, and I've been within the greatest temples of Jerusalem, places where men have fought and died to be. Yet, in all my time, I've never been asked to speak into a box. This new era is utterly bizarre, forgive me for saying. I've seen men waltzing the streets in purple, looking as if they don't realize they're dressed like emperors. I've seen buildings so grand and vast that they touch the skies and hold more people in them than the greatest manor houses of my time could have dreamed of. But most astonishingly of all is this. This is nutmeg, and in my time, it was precious. Every single seed was worth its weight in gold. Every single seed was worth 100 workmen's lives. Yet here I am, holding a jar of it that I bought for nothing but pieces of colored paper. Yet I hear of even more miraculous things. I hear of men's lives being preserved after losing limbs. I hear of cures, real working cures for the worst of ailments and diseases. It is clear to me I have so much to learn from this new era. But at the same time, it is also clear you have much to learn from me. I am scared of just how much of my time has been forgotten. I'm sure that if I said the word Gambeson, most of you would have no idea what I was talking about. Still, though, I can take comfort in knowing that some things simply never change. The toilets right here in Green School are a spitting image of the ones from the year 1410. I will tell you of my most recent journey, and maybe it was the most important one yet. So, surprise everybody, the medieval time traveler was actually me, Jordan Pratama, all along. Who would have guessed? Excuse those glasses. Now, let's begin with a quote. For the past decade, on American campuses, history has been declining more rapidly than any other major, even as more and more students attend college. Eric Alterman of the New Yorker magazine. Please, let me ask you what that makes you feel. I'm sure that for most of you it brought a distinct feeling of indifference. And I can't blame you. After all, for most of you, the word history is associated with long, dull hours in a classroom, learning about dead people and events you don't care about, all because you need to know this. Now, I agree history taught this way sounds awful, and I wouldn't be surprised if many of you felt that Green School's general lack of history until recently was a blessing. But that mindset needs to change. History is alive and just as important to the future as the present is. The steep decline in history as an academic discipline is something that should worry us all. History is like the world's memories of things as tiny as towns to things as huge as entire cultures. Memories of things as insignificant as a lord's wedding to things as earth-shaking as the world wars. Historians are the keepers of these memories. They remember for us all. Sorry about that. Now, as Rum Tan, founder of Smile Tutor, wrote, history is used as a way for us to assess our past failures and successes. We peer into history to see what mistakes we can prevent from happening again, and what successes we can capitalize on. I'm sure by now I've made it all too apparent that I care deeply about history. I wanted to leave at least a few kids with an interest in it, to learn about it not because they had to, but because they wanted to. I wanted to leave at least a few kids with this passion. But how would I? Well, I discussed that question with Pak David. How would I? We agreed that history is best taught when it is captivating and tells not only the dates and times, but the story behind an event. We brainstormed how I could accomplish this, and then it hit us in the face. It was so obvious. Who better to tell a story than someone who was there? So, it was decided. I would play the role of a medieval time traveler and, in costume, in character, teach kids about history. I got into contact with Ibu Preni, who was more than happy to help me design and tailor an outfit, which, as you can see, I'm wearing now. While I did this, I designed a lesson plan to teach primary schoolers with, and got into contact with Pak Michael, a grade 3 teacher whose class I wanted to teach. Now, let's pause for just a minute. Why grade 3? Well, the answer is simple. They are at the perfect age to learn. Their minds have clicked in a way that lets them tackle trickier and more complex topics, but at the same time, their worldview remains unmarred by cynicism. I was designing my lesson plan, I had gotten into contact with Pak Michael, costume was going well, everything was going well. But I think you know what I'm going to say next. COVID-19 was declared a pandemic, and as you can see here, I've put up some fitting medieval era plague art to go along with it. Now, this was a massive shift for both myself and most other grade 8s. After all, how could I teach an engaging and captivating lesson from a distance? Well, it took some brainstorming, but eventually I began to adapt my lesson to a distance learning environment with the help of Pak David. I would film myself, or more aptly, my character, giving the lesson, but along with that, I would also provide a workbook, which, as you can see, a snippet of it here. Along with the workbook and video lesson, I would also provide the kids with some optional extra photos for context, and some other more hands-on, fun activities for them to do. Now, unfortunately, due to time complications out of my hands, I have not been able to get this to Pak Michael quite yet, but I am on the cusp of completing this, and Pak Michael will soon be showing it to his class after this speech. Now, let's go back a bit. Earlier I mentioned how history is like the world's memories. I'd like you to think of it like this. Forgetting the horrors, atrocities, but most importantly, the lessons of events as earth-shaking as the world wars and things like it is like forgetting a deep part of the human journey. It is like forgetting how to walk. It is like forgetting how to feel empathy. Now, by this point, I've mentioned a few times, I've mentioned the world wars, and I'm sure some of you may be thinking to yourselves, if the world wars are so important, then why did you teach a course on medieval history? Well, I've had an interest in the medieval era for a long time, but the thing is, most of you have too, maybe without knowing it. I'd like you to think of the stories of knights, castles, and of course, dragons that permeate so many of our childhoods. The medieval era looms large above our childhoods. I wanted to use my knowledge of such a prevalent and iconic event to hopefully use as a gateway to history for these kids. I wanted to get them first hooked on the medieval era and then on the rest of history. Kids don't learn when they're bored, and there's no point in learning about something that you aren't engaged, interested, and captivated by. And that is one of history's biggest failures in the classroom. It's so often taught boringly and in a way with no soul. With so many of us paving a path forward to a better future, we cannot forget the path that led us here, the cobblestones that lie behind us. We cannot forget our history. Now, I would like to quickly offer a thank you to Pak David, who was my quest mentor throughout this entire ordeal and who helped me with planning and scripting. I would like to give a huge thanks to Ibu Preni, who played a huge part in my quest by helping me create this awesome costume, which is also very comfortable. I'd like to thank Pak Michael for being so willing to let me teach his class on something that I care so deeply about. I'd like to thank my mother and father for always being there to help me through this with practice, even when I was in a bad state. And of course, I would like to thank all of you for listening to my quest speech. Thank you.